Joanna taught me so much about so many things. And in the last months of her life, to be in her presence, it was like I felt like she went from gratitude to awe. Like, this is the only moment there is. Here I am with you. Why would I want to be anything but just filled with awe? Because it's the only moment there is. So I feel so deeply inspired by those last years of her life where I saw her inhabit that really fully.
Don't take it, don't. Don't take it, don't. Don't take it, don't. Don't take it, don't.
Welcome, everyone. I am Kira Epstein. I'm the co-director of the new school at Commonweal. We're recording live from Canticle Farm in Oakland, California. The conversation is going to be with Anne and Terry Symons-Bucher and our host, Serena Bian. And the conversation is going to be about Canticle Farms and about your work founding it and what you do here and how you do it, which is influenced by St. Francis of Assisi and also by the work of Joanna Macy, the Work That Reconnects. So welcome, everyone. I want to say a couple of words about Commonweal and the new school at Commonweal. The new school is the learning community and podcast for Commonweal. And Commonweal is a nonprofit that's just getting ready to celebrate our 50th anniversary. The new school, the learning community and podcast, is the sort of portal into Commonweal's work for the public. We do all kinds of events, workshops, retreats, musical concerts. We have hundreds of podcasts. You can find them on any of the podcast media sites. We have them on YouTube, we have them on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and so on and so forth. Anne and Terry Symons-Bucher and host Serena Bian, thank you for joining us at the new school at Commonweal.
Well, I'm Serena, and I'm one of the co-hosts of the new school here at Commonweal, and I've been a part of the Canticle community myself for the last year or so. And I'm just so grateful to be in conversation with you, Anne, and you, Terry, and thought that, I have an intro of you both, but maybe we could start off with the acknowledgement and the welcome and get all of our voices in. How about that?
Sounds great.
Absolutely.
So welcome. We thought we would like to involve you in our beginning here because one of Joanna Macy's things was that the voice we most need to hear is our own voice, the voice from within. So we always want to be participatory. But also, we think everything belongs. We have a liturgy outside every week, liturgy, the work of the people, and we begin with a community welcome. We'll start with a refrain that we'll do call and response. We'll do at the beginning and then at the end. Okay, here we go. We are welcome here as we are. We are welcome here as we are. We are welcome under these stars. We are welcome under these stars. We are welcome here. We are welcome here. And we are clear in love. And we are clear in love. So I hope you feel more welcome than you did when you walked in the room. And I hope you'll continue to feel more welcome with each minute that goes by, and that we all can deepen in our knowing that we belong, that nothing can separate us from our belonging, from each other, and from the living body of Earth. So we have another practice we wanted to share that really tells a lot about what we're trying to do here. We call it our acknowledgement and commitment, and we invite you to join us if you would like. We do this choral style, so we just invite you, if you feel called to say this commitment with us. We know this is the work of the rest of our lives, and it's our way of making that commitment every week to stand again to do this work of healing.
So we name that we live in a nation created by enslavement and genocide of peoples, the taking and destruction of their lands, and the justification of these acts by the Christian doctrine of discovery, white supremacy, the divine right of kings, and manifest destiny. We know it continues today.
We acknowledge that some of us continue to benefit from this history,
Others of us continue to suffer from its injustices, and some of us experience both.
Through grace and humility, we invite healing as we ask forgiveness for what we and our ancestors have done and failed to do.
With their help, we commit ourselves to transform rather than transmit the trauma. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. I mean, in some ways, that's the best introduction and says almost all there is that is needed to say about the essence of Canticle Farm and the ethos that comes behind it. And I'm with that. You know, we say this acknowledgement every Sunday in the fire circle again and again, never quite living up to it. There's a poem that we read too called An Ode to Failure. And it really is about Rumi's poem, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. You know, it doesn't matter if you've broken your vow 1,000 times, come, yet again, come. And a question that I know the two of you often get is, you know, how has Canticle been able to sustain itself over however many years, living with such diversity and difference and love? And how do people in the daily act of community building, how does it work? And so I'd love to firstly ask you both to share a little bit about where we are, what Canticle is, and how this place has been able to sustain imperfectly and beautifully over the years.
I just happened to run into this quote. I don't think things happen by accident necessarily, but this quote by Dietrich Bonhoeffer yesterday. In his book, he wrote a book called Life Together, a fairly well-known book, I think. And he said, the person who is in love with their vision of community will destroy community. And it's like, because I had my own vision of community. Anne and I got married based on a vision of community. Also based on about 39 years ago, based on a vision of marriage. That, and I stuck to my vision as long as I could. And then eventually you realize what is actually happening. And it may or may not match up with our vision, our dream. Really, it's our dream, our dream community, our dream relationship, our dream job. At some point in the eldering process, we realize, actually, I'm here, at least a large part, to acknowledge and appreciate what is. And so a lot of what, in answer to your question, Serena, really a lot of it for me personally has been paying attention to what shows up, committing to community, committing to relationship, staying in relationship, and appreciating what is, tending to gratitude. It's one of the primary phases in the spiral of the work that reconnects is to begin with gratitude. And it's also a primary spiritual practice, I think, of all major spiritual traditions. So, to ground ourselves in gratitude. So that's a stab at that question there. Yeah. You want to add anything?
I can't. There was so much in your question, so much richness there.
Maybe what is Canticle?
What is Canticle? A canticle is a song, and that really the word means song, and I think so. I'm being poetic here, but it is really we're trying to sing in the world that we know is possible because we don't think we can. Do it the way we got ourselves here. We got to find something different, and music is so healing, and so it takes us into a different way of being. So, and singing, can change the world. It's true that it can. So that's metaphorical, but also it's real for us. But the Canticle of St. Francis of Assisi is one of our inspirations, and Joanna Macy's. Work That Reconnects. Joanna is the root teacher, and all of that was at the root of her life and her teachings, which a lot of that is about emergence. So being so like doused in her teachings, which I had the privilege of being able to be for many years. When this place finally started to happen, I had really had a different way of thinking, which is, Joanna would say, when hydrogen, she'd use her hands, when hydrogen dances with oxygen, who could have imagined that water would emerge? So we talk about those as canticle moments. So we met, we fell in love, we felt called to do this work. There's something calling all of us. We're each here, we believe, to do something in service to life. We talk about that here as soul work. So we're here, trying to do what is ours to do, to create, our service delivery mechanism to be in service to life. This is given to us. So it's one step at a time. You just do the next thing. You got the vision, but you can't go from A to Z. You got to go through the whole way through the alphabet, and then there's the idea of what you think it's going to be, and then there's what Terry said, like the reality of it. And what I guess I want to say. So we're a nonprofit organization that holds the land, and we are an intentional community. And we had a lot of ideas, as Terry said, about what that was going to look like. And we have the foundational practices of Franciscan spirituality and the Work That Reconnects, and then other things flow in here. And all these things dance together, and what emerges is more than the sum of its parts. And about, I don't know, we're celebrating 15 years. So I no longer, you talk about 50 years of an organization. That is really awesome. 15 years no longer feels like a young community. I think I don't know what we are. I also don't think I don't want to say we're an adolescent community, because that has such connotations in kind of our Western culture. But for a long time, I felt just like we are a young community and we're just figuring things out. There was a moment, so there are people who've been here now for 10 years, 8 years, 9 years. In a community that's 15 years old, that's a long time. And there was a moment a few years ago, many of them, where I can remember thinking, what in the world are we doing? Because what had emerged to be very fundamental about what we were doing was the work of healing across the divisions of race and class and gender and religion and all the isms, and interestingly, that was kind of co-arising for us here as the divisions in our country and world started to be more sharp and more apparent. And so that has been the work that's been so profoundly moving and life-changing for me, for us, and that is happening in this community that is so precious. And I can remember, because we got married. We loved each other. We made a commitment to stay together forever. And, those things were there when we decided to be in community with each other. And then none of that was there, with so many of the people who've come here. We didn't love each other, not at first. People end up here. I think it's very spirit-led how people end up here. They find their way here, and life brings them here. Grace brings them here. But initially, we might have some instant falling in love, but we don't really know each other, right? And now we're living together, and there isn't like a commitment, to hang in there if things start to get rough, which of course they do, because people, bring conflict with them. The conflict will surface. So one of our commitments is to nonviolence and to restorative practices. So we have all these practices, but then we have people who haven't yet learned to love each other or actually say, I'm going to stick around when things get hard. And I can remember just like many moments, like, what are we doing here? So we were holding it as, well, it's an experiment, like Gandhi's experiments in truth. We're doing, we're in the muck, we're getting up and wiping ourselves off, we're carrying on. And then there was I don't know, fast forward a few years, and I can remember having a sense of, wow, now there's love here. Like we love each other, and out of that love, there's commitment. There's commitment. People who came here who didn't think they were going to be here for maybe a year, however long, have been here for many years. So the real work, there was all of that was so much work. And then, I don't want to say the real work, that was real work, but we are in a place now, I would say, of like deepening in that, to where the healing, that can happen, the transformation, these commitments, the practices, in terms of our intentional community or deepening. I kind of had my image was we were up here, and then like this taproot came down, over years, and finally hit Earth, and has just been pulling us down, so that we're like grounded in something. And it's been such a privilege and an honor to be able to accompany Canticle in these years. And does that answer your question? It's so, we tell people it's so hard to describe what it is. It's not something you can say in 2 words, but come and see, come and experience. We've taken down fences. We've had opportunities to buy houses. There's miraculous people who show up and support us. We have found people who want to, be part of, we live our lives, as Rilke says and Joanna quoted, in widening circles. We know we could not be doing this without the widening circles of support of so many people. So we're so grateful for that interdependence. And, one time I said, when someone asked me, what is this place? I said, we're experimenting at the intersection of faith-based, social justice-based, and earth-based nonviolent activism. And so the first thing I want to notice is that those things got torn asunder. So what does it look like to reweave those things? So that if you're acting with those things rewoven, what does it look like to act? How do you act if those things are informing you? And fundamentally, I can remember after years of being involved in the Work That Reconnects, just like deepening, and what are we reconnecting to? It's like everything. So, to self, to each other, to earth, of which we have never been separated. But even the idea of calling it nature, is like, so I say it's outside, it's not nature, we're nature. So we're healing, reweaving back to like understanding who we truly are. Our interdependent, we're not separate. So this idea of the separate self, we're just working to heal that. And what does that look like? When you're doing that in a community, we have, 40, 45 people. From our youngest member is 1. We have 2 new babies on the way. We have people in every decade of life up to 79. Very interracial community, lots of different spiritual practices, intergender, and just like a taproot of love that's got us grounded to just, be present for whatever the next thing is. So it's very, very emergent, as you know. And I also don't want to paint a picture of, how it's all like sweetness and light. It's community. There's conflict, there's trauma. We try to step toward it with our tools as we can. And I think one of the things that I believe is we don't get asked to do our work without being given the medicine to do it. And, we have stinging nettle out in the yard, and sometimes, it doesn't feel good, that medicine. But it's there for us. So we train our eyes to see what is the medicine and just keep walking one step at a time. So,
one of the things that I often find myself engaged in when on the land and here with the community are conversations about conflict, whether we're experimenting and physically playing with puppets around conflict and how it shows up, or sitting with an elder, sitting with Terry about, moving through something that is happening in my own life and being accompanied in these questions, or getting to process something that is happening across or within the community. And it's been such an exploration and interest in my own life, the ways that conflict is, and you both mentioned soul work. Conflict, I see, is also an invitation into our soul work, both as individuals as well as a community, and how that is a fractal of then the larger work that is happening in our times. And I know that that's something that you both are very passionate about, also through the rites of passage work that you're both engaged with. And I would just so love to hear your reflections on the role of soul in conflict, in transformation within ourselves, and how that also shows up within the community.
So I'm going to start by saying that we break most of the rules of community living up to this point, but we do it intentionally because we don't think that the rules apply anymore. The rules for community are you usually either have a mission that you all share in, some work, feeding the poor, something that you're doing, or you have a shared political vision, or you have a shared faith practice. We don't have any of those. And we're very diverse in that way. So there is nothing at Canticle Farm that's mandatory. There are opportunities to do things. We have a liturgy on Sunday mornings. It's not required that community members come, and most don't. And we have people from outside the community that come. We have a community meeting, we have community meals, but none of it is required. And that comes out of our experience of training in nonviolent communication and the result and watching the result of what happens when people do things out of obligation or some sense of duty when they really don't want to. So what that taproot that Anne is talking about is really the taproot of our wanting and to be in relationship and to live in the community, because no one is here that doesn't want to be. That may sound just, yeah, of course, but we all do things because we think we ought to or should, or we get stuck into patterns and then we can't find the exit ramp, right? So here at Canticle Farm, we really do emphasize that, and this goes really to your question about soul work. It's like, what is yours to do? And when I talk to people like Serena who enter our discernment process around joining the community, I always say, you may come and live with us for 3 months or 6 months, and you may end up saying, this is not for me. I'm not going to join this community. In fact, I'm moving as soon as I can. And I would celebrate that. I would celebrate that clarity, because if you came and you didn't really know what it was yours to do or whether you wanted to live here or not, and you got the clarity that this is not for me, celebrate that. Absolutely great. How can we support you to go do what you need to do now? Because that's what we're here to do. We're all part of the web of life. We're all holding on to the threads that we're given, and to do that work is our opportunity and our privilege. Too many of us spend our lives doing somebody else's work, and it causes problems. I would say it causes most of the problems in the world when we're not doing our own soul work. We're living somebody else's life. Steve Jobs once said, we don't have enough time to live somebody else's life. We got to find our life. And so we really emphasize that here now. But how do we do that? Because what happens is, or what has happened, is we're born into this life and we have a whole load of trauma given to us. It's our ancestral trauma. And then we get collective trauma, from what's going on in these times. And then we pick up our own personal trauma. So there's a lot of trauma going on. And trauma is simply being cut off from ourselves and cut off from other people and from Earth. It's the trauma that happens inside of us. And so conflict, to go to your question around conflict in my mind is trauma that's showing up as disguised as a disagreement or something you did or something I did. And now we're going to fight over that, but really it's trauma coming up. Because I can disagree with you about something, okay, fine, no big deal. But when the trauma gets hooked up, then all of a sudden we get the reactions and a lot of pain. And so that trauma also keeps me disconnected from myself and my own soul work, just to make that connection. This is how we kind of envision this. We only have 6 agreements for people that we recommit to every year. And those 6 commitments are: 1, to nonviolence. That's the first commitment. We have a definition for it, and we know that none of us are necessarily walking around completely nonviolent, but it's a value in the community. Then the second commitment is a commitment to our restorative practices. We have people trained in restorative circles and restorative justice. We actually have a room on the land here that is dedicated to restorative circles and only restorative circles. It's like a sacred space for us. It's not to be used for anything else other than meeting and working through and engaging the conflict that's come up, either together or with a mediator or support or whatever. But that room it's our restorative circle room, and it's only meant for that, to remind us that, just like we have kitchens and we have bathrooms and we have bedrooms, well, working with conflict is a human need, and that space is there to do that. So a commitment to our restorative practices, and then a commitment, because what we have found is that it's easy to say, oh yeah, I'm committed to our restorative practices. If I get into a commitment, if I get into a conflict, I'm right there, I'm gonna work it through. But when the trauma comes up, when we're really in a lot of pain and it's just like got us, we're being hijacked because of what's going on, sometimes it's really difficult to have the capacity to even enter the room and to enter the process. So the commitment is, if you don't have the capacity to engage in the restorative practice, find out what's going to get you that capacity. What do you need? Do you need therapy? Do you need training? Do you need time away? Do you need support from someone else? What is it that you need in order to develop the capacity to enter into the restorative circle? We have a commitment, an agreement for feedback. It's really important, and Anne may say more about living systems theory and what we've learned from Joanna Macy, who got her PhD in living systems theory, and how important feedback is in a community or in any relationship. And so we have a commitment to, we want feedback from the community. If you're having a hard time in the community, don't walk around simmering about it. Don't let it eat you up. Say something. Give the feedback to someone so that, or to the community itself at a community meeting, so that we can hear what's going on for you. And then, but also be willing to receive feedback. So if something's going on that's triggering people, we have a commitment to create the space in which that can be heard. And then we have a commitment to a spiritual practice. We have people from all various faith traditions, and none, N-O-N-E, but we do have a commitment to each other to have some spiritual practice, whatever that means to you. And no one checks up, but the commitment is a spiritual practice, because we realize to do this work that we've undertaken, you can't do it without a spiritual practice. You have to have something that grounds you when it can be personal stuff, but it's also what's going on in the world. We're all facing things, as a human species that can just knock us over, can just fill us with pain. So we just say, to do what this community is committed to, you have to have a spiritual practice. So we have what we're developing, a Sangha house. We have people that practice Buddhist meditation. We have our liturgy, which has a Christian reading, but we also like to think that it's inclusive to any faith tradition. People seem to find it very inclusive. And we have other practices that people participate in. So that was a lot of words, but I don't know how I could have got around it with less. Do you have any follow-up, or is there something that I missed that you really want to?
That's great.
Okay.
And I'll jump in and share something very honest and quite vulnerable in a conversation that I've had with Terry as part of my own discernment process in joining the Canticle community. And there was a situation that arose in which I won't share it because it's pretty embarrassing, but it had me reflecting on whether or not I cared about what someone or particular people had thought of me, or a particular motivation for an action I had done. And I was sitting with Terry, And, I said, their projections are totally wrong about myself. My own motivations are very pure. And he went along with it, and we were talking and talking. And then there was this quiet little voice in me that had never made the light of day. This also happened to be after a liturgy in which Terry was talking about shadow work. So maybe that was part of it in the unconscious. And this little voice said, but what if that was true about you? Like, what if you did care about what people thought of you? Or what if there was this part of you that was wanting to be worthy or feeling that you wanted to be seen as worthy in order to belong to the community? And so we were just engaged, and you were so open and so non-judgmental to me, which was what I think actually allowed for this part of me that I had never realized was present and quietly guiding me and some of my behaviors. And the thing that I loved, what you shared, Terry, was you said, now the point is not to just stuff that part of me away that thinks it's not worthy for belonging or thinks it needs approval, but rather to really bring that part in, and that it's really not about the other people or person, it's about myself. That's just one reflection on the vulnerability of community, and the refinement that can be possible too. And I've been in such an unexpected journey of examining my own self-worthiness. Where does it come from? I thought it wasn't so dependent on external sources of validation. I thought I was kind of over that. but I'm really with wow, what does it mean to just be loved, period, and to show up in community with that sense of wholeness, and recognizing that the ways in which that has been fragmented within myself was from hurt and from trauma or from past experience, and just this journey, which has been so painful, has created such capacity for compassion that if this is something that I experience, how many of us in our own ways, for varying different reasons, experience our own journeys of soul and of wholeness. And that, the people that I often think of as monsters within myself, they're really just unloved parts of ourselves, and the work of community, of inviting in all of that in each of us. What a gift and what a challenge. Yeah.
Well, I love that, Serena. And I would say if I had to pick one word to kind of just describe everything, it would be relationships. And one of our teachers, and one of the practices and flow-throughs that comes into Canticle Farm that's very much shaped and formed us is the work of Bill Plotkin and Animas Valley Institute. He's a depth psychologist and a wilderness guide, and we've studied with him, and he's the one who we get this language of soul work from. But I also love, what I've learned about shadow from him. And it's, the beautiful thing about relationships is that people hold up mirrors for us to see things that we can't see. And if we could see them, they wouldn't be in the shadow, right? So it's okay that stuff is in the shadow, And if we can be open to being on a journey where we can see people who are reflecting back both our beauty that we don't want to own, because that's part of it too. We don't see our beauty. We can take back those projections, the golden ones and the painful ones from someone else, and integrate them. So relationships, community is a beautiful container in which to do that, and we just keep given opportunities all the time for it. And I've just come. It's simplistic, but it works for me. If I'm activated by something, I instantly know there's shadow stuff for me, and the opportunity is to step toward that. And I just feel really grateful to have a practice of doing that. And Terry mentioned feedback. The more you have feedback in a system, the less you need a restorative system, right? The less you need to use a restorative system. Practicing all these things in a diverse community is where things get very challenging because of the trauma. And I want to say especially the racial trauma, because the racism that we are drenched in this country, the foundations of this country, which have not been acknowledged or healed, and the racism that continues to this day. So we will always be working through that trauma. And that's been a gift to do that work as well, and to understand which parts of me need to come out to be available for healing. And I feel so grateful as a white identified person to be in a predominantly people of color community where there's love now and trust and relationship to be able to do that healing in community. So that's been a huge gift. But I just want to say I feel grateful for all these teachers. Dominic Barter, whose restorative system we've adopted, he was the first person I heard say conflict is a gift. And I can now I really feel it and believe it, but I can remember how shocked I felt when I heard him say that. And it's that stepping toward the shadow, stepping toward the conflict. And in that, if we can do that with tools, and we want people to primarily and foundationally feel safe. That's what Terry's talking about. It's a voluntary process. If you find you can't do it, then we want to help you get to where you have the capacity. But time and time again, there is such an intimacy that that can be born out of stepping toward and working through those things. And I think when we see, I'll just speak for what's going on in this country, when we see how far we have become divided because we can't do that work with each other. This work is, and the work of forgiveness feels so fundamental to what we need to be doing.
I'd love to dive more into forgiveness and how that work of repair, of reconciliation, of forgiveness, how that is also present here, and the process, like the inner heart refinement that is required for that. What does that look like here, and also within your own lives as it relates to Canticle?
Well, I'm with Father Greg Boyle, who's one of the visionary founder behind Homeboys Industries, wrote a book a few years ago called Forgive Everyone Everything. And that book came into my hands not that long ago, and I was carrying it around in a bag. Somehow my water bottle spilled on. I was spending time in the hospital when Joanna Macy fell, and I was in the hospital many nights with her, and the pages were all wrinkled from the water. But I was looking at that book with her, and Greg saw that on a bumper sticker somewhere, but it spoke so deeply to me, and so I've adopted it. I want to be somebody who forgives everyone everything. Now I say that, and I don't want to. I know that some things. We all have our things that have happened to us, both in our lives, ancestrally. So it's my personal practice to be stepping toward that repeatedly, because it's worth the work. I'll start right here, in a relationship. It's worth the work time and time again to keep coming back to what does it look like to forgive. And for me, I see it as like it's an act. Joanna would always teach about gratitude. It doesn't depend on external circumstances. And I think that's true about forgiveness, and it's true about hope. It's true about love. We can choose to put our attention there. We don't have to feel it. It doesn't have to feel good. Martin Luther King, when asked, how can you love these people? It's like love is not a feeling, it's a choice. So I see forgiveness in the things that have happened to me that have been the most difficult. It's been like, I'm going to choose to forgive. And then I see personally like reconciliation as a process. And sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and it takes time. And I, need a lot of help to keep putting my attention there. And it's not about bypassing, it's about when I've done something, what do I need to do to make amends? When someone has done something, how can we name it? This is why this acknowledgement and commitment for us is so important, because it starts by naming And so I've been wondering a lot in this community, because we have some, just like some of the people we get to live with here, I'm just like blown away by the lives that they've had, the trauma they've experienced, and their capacity to forgive. Like, I'll name Watani Steiner. And if you don't know his story, Google him. He's been working on his memoir. It'll be out soon. So he's a teacher to me. Jesus is my, first and foremost teacher. So when I hear forgive 70 times 70, when I hear, and I grew up on this, I grew up understanding what it meant to be a follower of the gospel, that this wasn't like sort of a choice. It's kind of like, this is what it means. So I've had that sort of in my bones, and I just feel grateful for it, because I want to be that person. So it's work that I want to pick up and do. And I think we just need more of it in our world. When I look around, I mean, there's a lot to say about it, right? There's a lot to say. And I want to really speak for myself, and I want to meet anybody who's wrestling with it where they are, because, we have this idea that some things are unforgivable, so I want, if someone's carrying that, I would want to sit with great empathy and compassion for that. And, we all know the stories. There's many of them of people who forgive, things that we couldn't imagine could be forgiven. We also got to learn at the feet of Marshall Rosenberg, and the practice of nonviolent communication was not just something he was working with in nice little situations, but he was in Rwanda, he was in Israel and Palestine, he was working in prisons, with people who had had family members murdered, and terrible things happened to them, where people could actually get to the point where they could see the humanity, after lots of the skilled, empathic listening that he would be able to do. I just see the world and what's going on, the acceleration of the great unraveling of so many systems, our ecological, political, spiritual, and what's happening in this country right now. I don't know how in the world we're going to get out of this without learning to forgive and learning to see the humanity in the other, and learning to step toward our enemy images, and learning to love. I just think we've got to do that. And that's got to be part of what we do in this time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to, related to the great unraveling and the great turning, turn towards one of the beloved root teachers of this place, and I know a dear beloved person in the both of your lives, Joanna Macy, and would love to take a moment to just honor her life and the teachings that she bestows that has so informed this place, and also the both of you, and would love to hear more about how her essence and her heart is continuing to live through you both. And maybe it's worth mentioning if you want to share about your relationship with Joanna as well over the years.
I met Joanna in 1984 at a workshop called Despair and Personal Power in the Nuclear Age. And, I was raised in this Catholic Franciscan parish just a few blocks from here, where I had a real good, solid foundation in, justice and peace. I just grew up. It took me to the Catholic Worker. I lived with Dorothy Day, so I had a lot of that. And I also was walking around with terror and fear and grief, being the first generation born under the bomb into the nuclear world, and there had never been any place for that. And then I went to this workshop and found a place for my grief, and found, Joanna was the first person who, I wasn't being too intense or too sensitive. I was having a normal reaction to being part of a living body that was, suffering with a suffering earth and world. So if I had never seen her again, it was a transformative experience in my 20s. But I did see her again over the years, and then 20 years ago, she invited me to be her executive assistant. And so I was able to spend the last years of her teaching, traveling and teaching with her. And so, yeah. I'm still, she was 96 years old, and every time I said goodbye, there was a little voice thinking, is this the last time you're going to see her? And she was so vibrant and so alive and so happy to be here and so present to this moment, and really convinced she was going to live to 100. And so even when she fell, I wasn't like worried. Although statistically, I have subsequently heard that it's, when people are older and fall, they often don't make it. But she survived the hospital, the hip replacement. She had COVID and pneumonia, and it was just breathtaking, and I had such a deep sense, she's getting out of here. And she did, and then she came home, and it, after a few days, it just started to look like, oh man, maybe this is going in a different direction. So, if you had asked me, what do you think will happen when Joanna dies? But I never thought about it that much. I think I would have said, there'll be a big response, but I couldn't, if this is an emergent property, I couldn't have imagined, what has happened. And it's been so moving, to see the community around the world it's like people are remembering all the people whose lives were touched by her and lives were changed and found her work. And so the community, it feels like, just got activated. And there's just been so much happening in that field that's been just awe-inspiring and breathtaking. And the last thing I'll just say is that Joanna taught me so much about so many things. And in the last months of her life, to be in her presence, she had, I make this distinction again, there's just my own definitions, take them or leave them, but it was like, I felt like she went from gratitude to awe. There was just, she had this practice of gratitude that took her into just being in awe in the present moment. There was just nothing else. And so I walked away, time and time again and I love, this is the only moment there is. Here I am with you. And why would I want to be anything but just filled with awe? Because it's the only moment there is. And to live like that, so I feel so deeply inspired by those last years of her life where I saw her inhabit that really fully. And I feel her so much still present with us. I want to just let everybody know that there's a memorial service for her on October 3rd at Grace Cathedral. And there's still a few hundred tickets left, 200 or 300 anyway, if you don't have one, to come in person. It's going to be a big going around the spiral of the Work That Reconnects, honoring her with her work with lots of music and poetry. And it's got a live stream option as well. So that's on Eventbrite. And I just continue to be, what's this going to look like? She's her inspiration in this moment. I don't know. I'm still walking in a little wobbly way. It hasn't, in some ways. Yeah, I'm still kind of waiting to hear her voice, but she's everywhere. That's what we're all feeling. So yeah, I can't overstate my gratitude for her influence on my life. And she loved Canticle Farm. So I feel deeply grateful to have been able to have my life dance with hers, and this is one of the fruits of that.
Thank you. One of the conversations I was in just yesterday in a very different context was with Jess Sorante, who was doing an intergenerational conversation series with Joanna, and a person that is also in my heart who was an elder at Commonweal, James Stark, passed away the same week that Joanna Macy did. And he was 80 years old, and similar to Joanna, just embodied such a deep presence and love, like big love. It makes me wonder, and the conversation with Jess made me wonder about, we're just generations of humans, and more than humans, walking each other home on the path. And yeah, with James's presence, with Joanna's presence, there's such a continuation of this work. I don't even know that I have a question. It's just an observation around, I find myself so engaged in work around intergenerational trauma and so interested in when we as young people inherit conflicts that have come far before us and are so protracted, and even within our own family systems, all this ancestral stuff, it's like, how do we do that alongside our elders? How do we do that alongside those that have come before and on behalf of the future ones? And in times of profound pain in my own life, to just be able to widen that zone of support and holding. Sometimes I get very angry at my ancestors being like, really? But there's also such medicine too. And yeah, I think I just have this prayer that the medicine continues to move through. And Terry, in a conversation we recently had, you also reminded me that there is already the medicine within us. And another tangent, but I can often outsource that medicine onto our great teachers and onto our great elders and wise humans, and it's within us. And so that feels like a developmental journey I'm on of the remembrance that it is within us, and we're just walking alongside each other in that. And when I'm with young children, it's just so evident to me how much medicine they have to offer just in who they are and their essence, and just how do we retain that and return to that life force. And so I'm curious about that notion of life force and how we return to that time and time again, particularly amidst these times, and welcome your thoughts or your own lived experience of that.
I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but what's coming to me is just Thich Nhat Hanh, the next Buddha is a Sangha. And I think about, Joanna lived in through a particular generational time, and now her work is, spread all around the world, and many, many people are doing it, and lots of iterations of it. And I think about redwood trees as well, when they're the great ones are gone, but what comes back, or these fairy rings, or the resilience we can learn. So I do think we're made for these times, those of us choosing to come, the young ones, you, everyone, we're here, we're made for these times.
In a couple weeks, Anne and I are on a team doing Elder Rites of Passage up in Washington through a men's organization that does rites of passage that I've been involved with for 20 years. And the way I'm hearing your question and how it strikes me is around eldering and elderhood, and then the intergenerational aspect of that, because you don't have elders without, it's implied or if not explicit. And part of what's coming up for me now is the tragedy that I am in touch with older people that want to be elders. I mean, not just older, but elder, that have gifts and experiences and wisdom and life to share. And this society, this culture does not have spaces where that can happen. And so to bring it back to community, one of the privileges of being in a community like this, for me, is to be an intergenerational connection. Of course, we have it in our family, but I think there's community offers a much greater spaciousness for those kind of relationships to happen, and for people that don't have the family spaces perhaps where it's happening. So there's that. There's the elders who don't, well, and some of them are just warehoused off. I mean, it's actually a planned separation from everyone else. So that's a tragedy, I think. That's something that hopefully at some point we can change, we as a people. And the other thing that I also think that is really important is so I'm working with men that want to be elders. And what I would say to those men, or what I do say to those men is you have to really listen to the youngers, to what they need. No, don't just walk in with an agenda. I'm the elder here, and now I'm going to tell you what it's been like, or what I learned in life. It may get to that at some point, but really it's a listening thing, and the true elders, of course, do that. But start with the listening, because I also think that there's a real part of the pain of being young in these particular times is not having your voice heard, not having a space. Well, the spaces where the voices are going are the social media, right? Which is deeply dissatisfying and just full of conflict and pain. So really intimate, close-in spaces in true relationship where voices can be heard and pain can be shared in a way. Those are the two things that came up for me in responding to your question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to open this up to our community here. If people have questions, reflections.
Howdy. I acknowledge that the work of Canticle Farm to build the world that you want to live in is a political act. But I also wonder if you are engaged as a community in political acts beyond that.
Not as Canticle Farm, not as a nonprofit. I mean, we have people here who are doing tremendous work with the incarcerated communities, the formerly incarcerated communities, the immigrant communities, refugees. But it's up to Canticle Farm is a space in which people find their soul work, and the people that are here have found their soul work, many of them with justice issues and, I would say justice issues. I will say that we have a house here we call Sister Water. In that house, from the very beginning, we have had formerly incarcerated men and their families, lifers from San Quentin who live in that house. It's right over here, who have been part of the community from the beginning. Anne actually mentioned one of the men is Watani Steiner. Look him up. Amazing, amazing person. We also have a house that is dedicated to an asylum program for people who have come across the border and are in the asylum process. So as a community, we support that kind of work.
This has been beautiful, thank you. And you mentioned the weaving together of things that had been unnecessarily or harmfully separated, the spiritual, the social justice, and the earth-based. And of course, I perked up when you said we are not separate from nature. What would you like to share about the earth-based, the actual soil and growing of things and the food, or whatever nature of that, the living system that undergirds the whole thing?
Well, we call ourselves Canticle Farm, and Terry and I have a little bit of a different take on where that came from. I really want to be aligned with the urban farming movement and decentralized growing of food, because I believe, agribusiness, these large systems are unraveling, and we have to get back to growing our food locally. So when you walk around our garden, it's verdant, and there's patches of where we're growing food here, there, and we've had to deal with, contaminated soil, like a lot of lead and other kinds of things here because of where we're located, the industry, and So every property we've bought, we've had that situation. The soil's contaminated, so there's like a whole process of remediation. And then there's what do you grow? How do how do you inspire other people to do that? So it's a work in progress. We do have a food distribution program that over the years, we had one for years before COVID that was basically sourcing from the farmers market and then making it available, not like as a charity thing, but as a, come and take what, and people were bringing from their own gardens and big exchange of food. And we have been partnered with Unity Council to help plant gardens. So it's a work in progress. One of the things you'll notice when you walk around here is just what happens in a neighborhood when you take down fences. And, I like to say our security is not in our fences and our barking dogs, but is in our relationships. And in a neighborhood like this one, where there's a lot of barking dogs and fences and security cameras, that's a tall ask. And yet when people come through here and see, what has happened when the fences have come down, and what is possible, this idea that we have divided up, these little pieces of earth. I had such a sense with the first fence that came down that the land itself was like in shock, but there was like a feeling of like, what does it look like to reintegrate? For a long time, the space didn't feel integrated, and then finally it did, but it took a long time. I think it feels that way now. When you walk around here, you kind of can't imagine that this all used to be divided up. And so I think, one thing that would be like amazingly transformative in cities is if people took down fences and grew food together, and I don't underestimate what that would look like, because we're, a lot of our safety needs do get met by having our privacy needs, our safety needs by having fences, and there's a sense of being protected and safe. And yet, I think it's also sadly the case. When I grew up, a few blocks from here, we knew everybody on the street, we knew our neighbors. And so often that's just not the case. People don't even know who's living next door to them. So again, back to relationships. So I think in neighborhoods that so many needs can get met by growing food, certainly the food, but also just creating community, creating healing, getting our hands back in the soil. So that's what we're aspiring to here. And then we were given a few years ago some property up in the Sierras, foothills of the Sierras, Calaveras County, that was Sierra Miwok land that was a Catholic worker farm for many years. So that's been a work in progress as well, to do a lot of healing work on that land, including dead trees. It's, in the middle of a place where climate change has impacted the trees and the forests, but also we're doing a lot of growing food there. So yeah, it's part of we're in the exploration that's part of the bigger story of how do we reclaim our soil, and how do we do it in a way. This is where again, like the dancing at the intersection of faith-based, social justice-based, how do we do it in a way that, honors indigenous traditions, that honors different ways of growing food, and doesn't replicate, the same problem. So does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah. We have lots of trees on this land, and that's been really interesting. One year, our grandson, the first year of his life, we literally just moved around the land, and there was always some place to harvest something from. So every time we bought a property and taken down sometimes we get backyards that are mostly just cement, but there were some trees. So amazingly, we ate through the whole year. There was something that was on a tree for a whole year. So I love that. I love that.
Grandmother to grandmother, grandparent to grandparent. My question is about the perpetrator that may be ancestral, maybe clearly inside, in that we can be hurtful to people. And the collective perpetration of how we live in this system, fully engaged and not able to disentangle very clearly how to live other than entangled in what our culture is now. And as a descendant of perpetrators of massacres and the full burden of what that feels like a moral injury to me, and the accountability and responsibility, and therefore actually my mission and my destiny seems to be, asking this question: where do we look for the healing that would aim towards right relationship in the collective way and in the personal way, to say there is gravitas in this burden of being a part of the difficulties that are harmful.
I just was more kind of like my heart was connecting with your own journey and what is yours to do and what you have been doing with your, as Mary Oliver would say, one wild and precious life.
Yeah.
I see you, somebody wrestling with this, and that's what we each get to do. There is no one size fits all, as you know, or one right. I mean, we don't think there's one right answer, and I think often, part of what we're trying to embrace here too is complexity, and often, we get there's so much complexity in the problems, and we can fall into wanting simple solutions, and there aren't any, right? And then we get stuck in the binary, and so even the language. I mean, this, so I would offer just some empathy to the language of the perpetrator. I want to just say to you, how can we translate that? Because you didn't choose that, right? So you're doing ancestral healing work, and you're showing up, and we believe healing moves backwards and forwards, and what you are doing is healing that, and the ancestors are with us to want to help with that. So I just so honor the work you're doing, Molly. Yeah, and I want you to, mostly just know you're not alone in it. That you are. This is a work, from Joanna in deep time, in the part of the spiral she called "Seeing with New Eyes," where we know that we're connected to the ancestors and that we act on behalf of the future ones, and we're here with those present. That's also human and the more than human world, and you're not alone. So the more you do so much, and you are acting in community, and you just take the next step. So I see your grief, and it's so beautiful, because I know your grief is your love, and your tears is part of how we heal, right? Those tears are so welcome, and we have so many tears to cry for what's been done, in our name. And so anyway, I just honor your journey.
Thank you so much. And I know the tears are the cleansing and the purifying, and I relate to your water, and now your place to walk around the water, because I remember when you were trying to get rid of the water and not have it flooding and not having it. And so it is a vulnerability that I feel, and that I see the restorative work of connecting to our world of beauty and wonder and awe, and that I was attracted to Joanna because of the grief, because of the facing of grief. It's really hard to be in a culture that doesn't think that grief is validated or valuable. So I resonate with your beauty and your offering of solidarity and connection and restorative actions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is what you're about.
Thank you.
Time for one more question.
I have one from the chat.
Great.
So the question is from Dr. John. He asks, is there a process for working with someone who clearly is not a fit in the community?
Well, I would say that becomes apparent, over time in relationship. At this point, I'm so deeply grateful for and amazed by, awestruck by, like, the beauty of the self-organizing system, and I just have more capacity to trust it. So, as Terry said, sometimes people come here and they think they want to be here, and it becomes apparent that it's not a match, and yet they get some gift that they take away from here, and they leave some gift from being here. So through feedback, through stepping toward conflict, through learning to love and be in community with each other, that's the process. The way knows the way. We make the road by walking it. It's very relational, as opposed to, something written that we do. Those are important, the agreements, the guidelines, and yet at the same time, as soon as we needed to have them and write them down, to me, it was an acknowledgement of the mess we're in. I have a word, blesskin. Everything's blessed and broken. I used to say everything's blessed and broken, and I was like, well, it's more like this. And then I was like, but I'm still using two words. It's blesskin, so it's spelled K-E-N, to get the second half of broken in there. Yeah, that's what it is. It's so. Okay, when you meet somebody and you start a friendship, you do not sit there and usually, let's write down the agreements now about how we're going to proceed with each other. And yet we think we have to do that for, these other communities. So that's okay. That might be a way. It's just not our way. They've emerged over time when things happen, and then we're like, okay, now how are we going to deal with that? And how do we want to learn from the stuff that happens, because we want to reduce creating more pain for people if we can. So we want to get wise. Part of the Franciscan spirituality that my theologian husband has taught me is it's in the particular, So every person who finds their way here is a particular, unique, unrepeatable person. Therefore, there's no process that can encompass, like an overarching process. So it's about, I learned a lot of this from Joanna as well, about we got to have it's like having a scaffolding, and then you stay flexible within it. So it's a great dance to do. So I hope that answered the question, that it's very particular, relational. You can't kind of talk about it outside of the person and the particular situation. And certainly we've had many people come here and decide to leave, stay here for a few years, decide to leave. There are people who don't feel very kindly about this place or their experience here. I hope they will come back so we can do the healing. I take the long view, because we were in a learning curve for a long time, and I know there are people I would love to have forgiveness and reconciliation with for stuff that happened that couldn't get tended at the time. Put that out there to the universe. It's something that matters a lot to me. Restorative is about standing again. We just try again. We're in the muck, we wipe ourselves off, get back up, try again. There is no perfection, so yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Anne and Terry, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone here in this room and online, and to those listening to this later on. I feel so grateful to know you both and to continue to have the opportunity to know you both. And so glad we could be here on these lands to have this conversation. And I wanted to ask if you two would be open to our ending this by your joint recitation of the Rilke poem that is so dear to your hearts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is a poem Joanna and her dear friend and co-translator Anita Barrows translated many of Rilke's poems, and this one continues to just live deeply in me. So listen to especially the last lines. I think our operating instructions are in the last lines of this poem.
You are not surprised by the force of the storm. You have seen it growing. The trees flee, their flight sets the boulevards streaming, and you know the one they flee, you move toward. All your senses sing him as you stand at the window.
The weeks stood still in summer, the trees' blood rose. Now you feel it wants to sink back into the source of everything. You thought you could trust that power when you plucked that fruit. Now it becomes a riddle again, and you again a stranger.
Summer was like your house. You knew where each thing stood. Now you must go out into your heart as onto a vast plain. Now the immense loneliness begins. The days grow numb, and the wind sucks the world from your senses like withered leaves.
Through the empty branches, the sky remains. It is what you have. Be earth now, an even song. Be the ground lying under that sky. Be modest now like a thing ripened until it is real, so that he who began it all may feel you when he reaches for you. Be earth now. Be earth now, an even song. Be the ground lying under that sky. Be modest now like a thing ripened until it is real, so the one who began it all may feel you when reaching for you. Be earth now.
Thank you, Anne and Terry, for joining us on the New School podcast. Take care.
Thank you.
Don't take it, don't. 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 Don't take it, don't.